All right, Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad we could make this happen. You've got some exciting things going on, and I'm looking forward to talking about them.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I always start these shows. I have to start with coffee or tea. These are my get to know you questions. So are you a coffee person or a tea person?
I guess it depends on the day and the mood. I drink both. So I actually drink probably more coffee than I do tea, but sometimes I like to switch it up.
Okay. So I have to ask, because that question begs the follow-up question, why? Is it more just like you like to relax with the tea or?
Yeah, I think for me, tea is more relaxing if I'm kind of like tired or, you have one of those days where you don't have some pep in your step here, or you didn't sleep well the night before or something like that. Then coffee or like an espresso is my go-to. But there's some days where I just kind of want to relax more, or if the weather is kind of, I don't know, cold out or crappy outside, especially if you're working frontline.
Yes.
It's a little bit, yeah, it's a bit more cozy, I guess. And yeah, I guess it depends on how I feel, what I'm eating. And so, yeah, I like a variety.
I love that. Do you have a best or worst travel story?
Best or worst travel story? I'd say I have more memorable stories than worse, but I guess I have one that's kind of a combination of both. I can share.
Okay.
Back in 2012, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro
Wow.
in Africa, Tanzania, Africa. It was one of my goals to climb a mountain, and the opportunity came up. So there was about 12 or 13 of us, a group of us went. We were raising money for a hospital. And so amazing experience. I mean, it went from like -40, or it went from like tropical to like -40 as we were climbing. But one thing you couldn't really prepare for is altitude sickness. And like the third day, it hit me bad. I was like trying to put one foot in front of the other. And then the higher we got, it was harder to breathe because there's less oxygen.
Yeah.
And anyway, there was moments where I was just thinking, what did I sign up for? Where's this helicopter coming to pick me up? I don't know if I can finish this. But the team was great. And the porters were amazing. Actually, one of the porters was like arm in arm with me at the end, making sure that I made it up at the end there. And we had to summit. We left at like 10 p.m. at night so that we could summit in the dark. And then we would arrive at the top and like around 7 in the morning when it was clear and the sun was coming up. Because later in the afternoon, like storms and stuff come in. So,
right.
And I think probably because they didn't want you to look down, we had headlamps on. If there was at one point I looked down and it looked like it just like you one wrong step, you're a goner. But I kind of wish that it was like an exhilarating experience. It was one of the most physically and mentally challenging things I've ever done. But I did it. I have the certificate to prove it. Yeah, so it was a combination of like really inspiring achievement as something that I accomplished, but at the same time, it was like I had moments where I was just like, man, I don't know if I can get through this. So I like to push myself in my personal life, not just through work, but having these different experiences, because I feel like it develops you like resiliency in your life in different ways. So yeah.
That's great. Were you successful in raising the money for the hospital?
We did. We raised a bunch of money, and they were trying to raise money so that they could get new equipment and build another wing within that hospital. So we had contributed to the portion of that. Yeah. So
awesome.
Again, some of the things I do, I always try to bring it back to the greater good. So it's not just myself, but are other people going to benefit from that as well?
That is so good. And that's, Amy, that's what I love about your story and why I wanted to interview you, just from some of the things I was seeing. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's talk about your journey. So you're currently in law enforcement. We'll get to that, but go ahead and tell us about your journey to get here. Obviously, it's going to be quite interesting when we got summiting Mount Kilimanjaro in there as well.
Yeah. How far back do you want me to go?
Well, I was born at a very young age. Yeah, no, we don't have to go that far back. No, just, I would love to hear a little bit of like what you did before law enforcement and then kind of what brought you to that career and why.
I guess for me, like I've always been, coming back to that greater good or this, I don't know, I have this drive within me. I think most police officers do. this drive within us to help other people. So, I mean, as far back as I can remember, since I was born, really, because I feel like it started in grade school with safety patrol and like recess buddies to make sure people weren't getting bullied, and making sure people were safe crossing the road, those types of things. I was always involved in different groups and committees, and then I continued that through high school. And same thing, sports, everything. So I guess as I got older, I was trying to decide, like what type of profession would suit my personality and my interest, especially with my passion for, helping other people. So as I went into university, I was kind of on the fence about what I wanted to do. Actually, I was going to major in biology because my sciences were always really, really high. And, but then my first year university, I was like, I don't know if I love all these 3-hour lab assignments on top of my schoolwork.
I'm sure.
And ended up taking some psychology courses, and I really that really resonated with me. And so I kind of just started going down that avenue, but I took majored in sociology with a minor in criminology. And then I want to say maybe my third year, I really started to consider law enforcement as a long-term career. And it kind of, like I said, fit my personality with trying to help other people. I know it sounds very cliche, but if you think about it, we have a lot of we have the ability to empower a lot of other people, especially in like the worst times of their life. And even just how we treat people, we have this ripple effect in the community that goes beyond, like I said, just beyond ourselves. So having that platform, having policing as a platform to do social have social change and leave positive impact and build trust and have respect and all these things. I know that there's tensions right now with community and police, from some of the stuff that's been going on. But I think this is the best time to get involved in law enforcement, because you're advocating and you're part of that change, and you're listening to what, at the end of the day, we're here to service other people. It's customer service. It's about what are we, what do the people want? Like we're the community, and the community is us, so we have to, and if we're not living up to maybe how we're doing business, then, that's constructive criticism that we need to take back and say, how can we do better? Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with human lives, right? It's, we don't want to be causing more harm. Like, that's why I really like the evidence-based policing approach too, because we're making decisions that's information-led, based on police science, not on, I think, I have good intentions, but we don't know if we're causing more harm to our own people within our own organization, but even to the community members too, right? So we need to be held accountable for what we do, and always evaluating and making sure that we're continuously improving, right? So anyway, so that's how I kind of got in law enforcement, and now that I am in law enforcement, I continue that same mindset, and I'm really trying to do my part as an individual in the industry, whether that's local at my own organization, within my own province, across Canada, nationally, but then also on a global scale, because we're all having the same conversations. We're all trying to solve the same problems. And the more you start connecting with other law enforcement professionals and within the industry, social justice industry, you realize that there's a lot of similarities, and we're all trying to do the same thing. So collaboration, networking. So that's why I do a lot of work internally, but then I also do a lot of work externally with some other police organizations too.
That's great. Yeah, I could not agree with you more on many of the points that you made. Let me back up for just a second, just for the sake of the listener. So you're on the Ontario, Canada area, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you grow up in Canada then, or you?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was actually born out east, and then my parents had moved to Ontario, so I grew up in the southern portion.
Okay.
And then for my job, about 11 years ago is when I got hired. 2011. So about 10 years ago, I got hired, and I moved up to the Greater Toronto area. So I've been up here since. So I moved away from home to come up where it was busier, a little bit more opportunity to just kind of dig my heels in and be part of what's going on up here.
That's great. What kind of positions have you held in your career? Just patrol, or also investigative units, or just a cursory overview?
Yeah, so started with Frontline, did that for, I think about, was it 3-4 years? And then I did a temporary transfer into major drugs and vice for about 10 months. Went back to the road for another year, and then I applied into crime prevention. Did a lot of work in crime prevention. I was there for about 4 years. I've got my international crime prevention specialist designation, and my also my situational awareness advanced practitioner certification as well, and a bunch of other stuff. But from there, I ended up, I was with another police service originally for the majority of my career. I was there for about 8 years. But then I took work-life balance into consideration, and I was commuting. I don't know if you guys have long commutes where you're at, but I was driving like an hour and a half on a good day, even longer. So I ended up
I complain about my 45 minutes. So yeah, nothing like that.
I was like, what am I doing to myself? And then, so I had to kind of think, long-term, especially if you're working shift work, right? It's like, you got to tack that on top, when are you going to sleep? You got to sleep. So anyway, ended up making a transfer. So I'm with a new police service, and just been blessed since my transfer. Because I've been doing a lot of the health and wellness related stuff on my own, but an opportunity came up where now I'm aligned with doing that work for my own police service. And so, loving it. And it's been amazing. So I'm a project manager for our wellness team right now.
Okay.
And, involved with like transformational culture change type work. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I saw you. It appears you are quite busy from your bio on LinkedIn.
When does she sleep and
exactly.
commute?
Well, and that's the thing, right? So we get into doing these kind of things. Like this podcast is all about empowering law enforcement officers in their personal lives. And for a while, I was a supervisor on patrol nights, 12-hour days. So like you said, with that 45-minute drive, 12-hour shifts, before long, you're like, I'm doing the opposite of what I come in here and teach and preach to everybody. So,
you have to keep checking in with yourself to make sure that you're balancing your wellness, right? Because then, and it's so fast paced, it's a high stress job. So, it's just lots of work, lots of paperwork. And, but I feel like when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. So for me, there is kind of a blend, and I do, I'm a police officer, but then because I do some stuff on my own too. So I guess it kind of blends some of the work that I'm doing. But anyway, I've got a lot of things up my sleeve that I'm trying to do in my personal life too, to kind of get kicked off and started to help more people as well. So
that's great. I love it. So let's go into, you talked about evidence-based policing. I've actually never heard that term as you laid it out. So can you go a little bit more into that? But that's also one of what you call your 5 pillars, right?
Yeah. So my main focus is health and wellness, not just for the officers, but for the community at large. And when you focus internally for your own health, which we can get into a little bit later on as a police officer, again, that has huge dividends, because how does that show up for your personal life with your family? How does that show up with your coworkers when you're on your platoon or your team? What does that look like if you're a leader in that leadership role? And then as an overall organization, what does that feel like? And then on top of it, when you're out there into the community and you're interacting with people, now you're affecting all those other people. So the work that you do on yourself has huge dividends for just everybody around you. And there's lots of research too that shows that we co-regulate with people. So when you're practicing your inner coherence and you're calm and you're mindful and you're the way you show up at calls or the way you show up in other people's lives, that's going to affect and de-escalate and also kind of calm other people too. So especially when you're constantly exposed to these high risk situations, how you show up is everything, and you perform a lot better too. So anyway, huge importance on that pillar. But I have 4 other ones. Another one that you mentioned was evidence-based policing. I also focus on crime prevention because that's the experience that I've had as well. And then I focus on law enforcement social media. So again, using that platform to share all the positive work that we're doing, because a lot of negative news media is out there, and sometimes that's what sells and that's what gets highlighted, but there's a ton of positive work that we're doing that doesn't necessarily get highlighted. So I think social media is a great platform to share and have that narrative with the community to show the other stuff that we're doing. And then the last one is equity and inclusion as it relates to gender, rank, race, mental health, etc. Because that's also important to see how else we can be doing better in our policies and our practices, our institution, how we treat each other at work, how we treat other people in the community. So having that level of awareness, I feel that everything comes back to mindfulness. Everything is about mindfulness. That's going to keep bringing that up. It's all interconnected, but I feel like these 5 things, they all kind of connect with each other, and that's why I think they're important, and that's why I kind of do some work with each of them.
Okay. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with that entire thing more. And we're going to get more into that, because actually what you're known as on social media is at the Yoga Cop, correct? So you're known as the Yoga Cop, which, you know, for the listeners out there, be sure to follow her on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we'll get more into that. But can you start kind of at the beginning of what brought you to yoga, and a little bit more about yoga in general and how it relates to law enforcement?
Sure. So before I became a police officer, I feel like I've been on a health and wellness journey for most of my life. It started back in university. I actually took a philosophy course. What was it called? I think it was animal ethics or something like that. It was the first time I was exposed to factory farming and understood about what was actually in our food and just diet and stuff like that. So that kind of sparked my journey on understanding just more about the body and how it functions, and just really trying to get healthy. And when I was done university, I wanted to experience living abroad. So I actually moved away to the Caribbean for just under 2 years.
Wow.
I lived in Cayman Islands. And while I was there, that was where I first started yoga. I was exposed to that. And I just loved the way it made me feel. I wasn't really practicing mindfulness at the time, but it was different than working. I've always worked out and, lifted weights and exercised my whole life. I've been a very active person, but this was very unique. It was different. It was kind of like exercise for your mind as opposed to just your body, because even though you're moving your body and it's a bit slower, it's mindful movement and you're connecting that mind, body, spirit, which I feel like sometimes we're missing that with, the daily activities that we choose.
Yeah.
So that just made me go a little bit more deeper to understand myself, really listening to my body and what it needs. And we're all so unique. It's funny because you hear all these fad diets or, try this or try that. And it's, it might work for some people, but not others. And that's because you honestly have to just figure out what's good for you. You have to stop, pause, listen. And I don't think a lot of people pay attention to their sensations in their body or how they're feeling. And, if you're not going internally enough, then you're going to miss the signs, right? And our body is super intelligent, telling us what it needs, and it can self-heal. So if you're not putting yourself in these types of states, then you're doing yourself a disservice long-term if you want to have good health, your whole life. So That's kind of how I was exposed to the yoga. And then I kind of had a practice. I was never consistent. But I did have a practice, and I was practicing more mindfulness before I got into law enforcement. And I feel like that's what's really helped keep my resiliency long-term. And I kind of made a pact with myself. I was a little bit older when I got hired into law enforcement. I am older than I look. But I made a pact with myself. I was like, I don't want this job to change me. I was very conscious of it, very aware. And I know it's easier said than done. But if you have intention behind what you're doing, then you have a little bit more control or like I said, listening, having that level of self-awareness about what you do need. So I definitely think that if you're in law enforcement, this is something that you should definitely expose yourself to. And again, I can share more of the benefits.
Please. So let me, yeah, and I want you to, for sure. Definitely want to go deeper into this. Let me back up to something you said though, because I think it's very powerful, and everything you said, I agree with 1,000%. My journey into the health and nutrition side of it has been very recent. I've I've done the fad diet things. I've done the insanity workouts years ago. I've done all these things, and I'm actually probably a poster child for the yo-yo diets and so forth.
Have you done the keto now next? No, everyone's on the keto diet.
So fortunately, no, I didn't do the keto diet, but I became I started listening a lot to guys like Rich Roll, the Rich Roll podcast, and some of these.
Yes, I've listened to him. Yeah.
So that had kind of started me on this journey. So that actually is a perfect setup for my question. So based on what you were saying, did you find nutrition and going down some of the roads that you talked about with animal ethics and so forth, did you find nutrition first or yoga first? Or did you find that those two kind of came together?
I found nutrition first. Yeah, I found nutrition first. I feel like that's usually the first step is people focus on their diet and exercise. Right. And then from there, you're kind of like, it's a layer. You're like, well, what else am I missing? Because I feel, especially the police officers too, you're like, got my diet, I'm eating healthy, I've got my exercise routine, but then there's a missing component and it's not enough.
And I think there's something about the intentionality too. I think there's something about that, like you said, listening to your body, because the more you start looking into things, and that's obviously not necessarily the purpose of this podcast, but I'm going to go off on a tangent because it's my podcast. But when you talk about things like factory farms and so forth, and I think some people, especially probably listeners of my show and so forth, are a little scared to go down some of these roads because then you start talking about people of different political affiliations. But these aren't political conversations. Two things can be true at once. Factory farms are a problem. There's certain things. And I think that as we start going into that more intentionality in what we eat and how it makes our body feel, and then we start taking that into health and wellness in general, and you start talking things like yoga or other physical fitness endeavors, I think these things are absolutely not only connected, I think they feed each other, has been my personal experience, that by doing one, all of a sudden you just kind of naturally go into this cycle where overall it leads to overall wellness.
No, I definitely agree. And I think, like you said, because it's a holistic approach and you can't really do one without the other. I feel like too, as you start to become more healthy and you become more aware, you start to learn and educate yourself a little bit better. And it's like, once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. You know what I mean? It's like, now my eyes are open, or you've just removed the veil from something I had no idea about. Now people want to choose to live that way if you don't want to understand, but what's the quote I've heard before? It's in a world of information, ignorance is a choice. You know what I mean? There's so much information out there. You've got YouTube, you've got the internet, there's just so much. But if you care about it and you want to do better for yourself, then you'll learn some of these things. But there's so many additives in food. I try to be mindful of like what I'm even putting into my body that way. And then recently, even just like, you don't think about chemicals and stuff that you maybe clean with in your house. So that's probably like more extreme than most people.
Right, but it's
at
true.
Least it's a conscious choice again of like, it's all kind of connected, and we don't think about the daily toxins that we're exposed to and how does that affect your hormone levels and your hormone, we've got these systems in place in our bodies and our organs are constantly detoxing, but when they're disrupted in certain ways, especially like as frontline, if you're working shift work, our bodies aren't made to be awake at nighttime. They're not made to eat at nighttime, but we're not taught this coming into law enforcement. What blows my mind is how is it still 2021 and we're not teaching our recruits these things, right? So like, we're just starting to build in these trainings now with our own organization, which I'm grateful for. And I'm part of that because, when I got hired, I didn't have any of that. And, here we are becoming more conscious, right? We're more conscious on, recognizing the type of work we're asking our people to do. So how can we support them even better? Just getting into shift work, your health is going to deplete already because you're higher risk for metabolic diseases, because of, again, you're in these unnatural patterns. Our bodies aren't made to be up at nighttime or eating at nighttime. So that throws everything off and that has long-term serious effects. So if you don't know how to manage that, what are the tools and like, when are you supposed to eat and how are you supposed to eat? And like, when are you supposed to sleep? And what are all these other things that are interconnected? If you don't have that education, if we're not teaching people that, then we're going to have more sick people going off work. We're going to have people that are not going to be healthy. You're not going to be healthy when you retire. And the things you do now can honestly, add 10 years to your life, if not more. And if you have kids or grandkids, or you want to be around to, be part of that. So
Right.
especially, we're in, like I said, we're in this serving role, and we need to take care of ourselves better. We have to take care of each other better. So I feel like this is a really important podcast that you're doing.
I agree with you 100%. But in all seriousness, that's exactly that's why I teach at our local academy, is exactly what you're saying. In fact, we've started doing something called Academy Resiliency Training, or ART, because everything has to be an acronym in this business, as you know.
Yeah.
Academy Resiliency Training, it's exactly this. It's about 5 or 6 of us instructors, and we all teach a different portion of it. Some on spirituality, some on, because all these different facets, health and wellness, going over just simple things, and going over the darker things too, like suicide rates among law enforcement and
Yes.
mental health. And so we go down that road. But then we have another instructor that goes over what you're saying with, so you, 2 people might be in a relationship and that you're going to the academy. Does that other person realize you're probably working holidays? You're probably going to be sleeping during the day. Is there light pouring into the room you're going to be sleeping in? We get very basic, have you thought about any of this? And what is this going to do to your relationship? And it's so powerful. And like you said, being 2021, it's almost hard to believe that these conversations are just starting in some circles.
Yeah, I definitely think that we need to have training. So if you're going to be working shift work, here's what you need to know about your circadian rhythm and your body and how to manage it. We're going to be constantly exposed to stress and trauma, and even just like the nature of our culture internally, sometimes that's actually worse. There's studies that show people have more mental health difficulties from sometimes the internal stuff, because when you're exposed to, like, you expect that, right? You expect the
Yeah.
stress, you expect to go to calls, you don't choose to hear and see everything, and it can affect you. But the daily grind of it's chipping away at you each day. If there's certain things internally that bug you, then sometimes that can add the same type of stress. But educating our officers on before occupational stress injury. So we need to be trauma informed. We should be teaching people, this is what's happening to your body. This is how to manage it. Here's the preventative aspect, but then also, let's say if you have an injury now, if you're not, if because it's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when. There's going to be days that you're not good, right? So it's like,
Right.
how do you get through them? How do you work through it? And, there's post-traumatic stress growth, right? You can go through some really tough times, but you can come out okay at the end of it too, and it's temporary. But we need to know how to manage that and bounce back quicker, right? If we're not teaching our people that, then it's going to be more difficult.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where, now you're seeing all these suicides on the rise, and it's an issue, right? We're recognizing that how we've been doing business, it's not sustainable. So we have to make changes.
You are so correct. In fact, this podcast I had started in March of 2019, but it was a short time later that a young lady on our platoon took her life. And so it's kind of become the why as to why I've not only continued it, but why this message is so important, and why I reach out, or, when I see someone doing the amazing things that you're doing, having you on the show to try to help someone out there listening. Because, I think law enforcement too, because a lot of times it attracts type A personalities. It attracts people who hike Mount Kilimanjaro. Those are the type people, because you want to do more. You see life as, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to change the world.
Yeah.
And that's good. But then that personality also can leave you not asking for help. It can leave you, kind of getting into a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors that can be very dangerous over the years.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of people, we're expected to be that way too, right? This mental toughness, this physical toughness. And yes, we are supposed to be that way when you're at a crisis, when you show up at a call, so we practice turning off our emotions, because we have a job to do. Even if we're, you might feel a certain way afterwards, you're kind of wearing that. I've really tried to hold space for people now, instead of really just like, show them compassion, but don't be so empathetic that now you're down there with them and you're taking that home and you feel it. So we have to kind of create boundaries when we're on these calls. But the issue is, when you're not at that crisis call anymore, you're back at your, station, or you're back at home, and you still have these walls up with your emotions, and it's dysfunctional. And then we don't know how to self-regulate, right? So like these yoga and mindfulness practice, they teach you how to self-regulate, how to get your body state back to baseline, because you're in this heightened awareness, this fight or flight.
Yeah.
And if you don't have these practices, that can set as a default pattern. So that means that's how you're operating all the time. Unconsciously, you don't have a choice. It's how your body's responding. And that causes issues socially, like in your own life, social circle, but your own health too, long term. So again, to your point, if we don't have these practices or we don't have these tools, then we start to self-regulate externally through alcohol, through maybe drugs, through sleeping pills, through whatever your addiction might be. Maybe it's, you know, a gambling or other types of things, or eating, or, you know,
I was gonna
like
say even
unhealthy
food.
foods. Yeah, unhealthy foods. And then, you know, and then it's like, and then it compounds, because then it's like, oh, then you're tired because of the shift work, and then you don't have the energy, so you stop working out, and then your health declines, and these, like, it's like a snowball effect. You know,
Yeah.
it leads from one thing to the next. So that's why having a routine, or even just having some of these tools to know what to do is can reap benefits on your health long term. You're just going to have more energy, feel better.
You are so correct. So let's go a little bit further into the yoga conversation. Now, you have a specific certification, correct? What is your certification in?
Yeah, so I have 3 different certifications. I have I took a specialized trauma sensitive yoga certification.
Okay.
Because obviously the work that I'm in, I think it's important to teach people how to feel safe in their bodies again when they're in that hypervigilant state and they don't know how to kind of come down. And if people have been exposed to certain things, they can have triggers and whatnot. So it's about working through them. And anyway, we can get more into that in a minute, but my other certifications are corporate yoga. So it's more so, I don't do like studio yoga. It's kind of like I come to you. It's more like one-on-one or groups, or, you know, at a corporate social setting or at my work. So just kind of getting people together and doing it that way, because you can literally do it anywhere. And it's for any age, any fitness level, any body style. And then I recently just got my gravity yoga certification, and that's more specific to improving your flexibility, your posture, so that you can have better range of motion. And the reason why I wanted to take that one is because I wanted to combine all these specifically for first responders and healthcare workers, because the equipment that we wear, we're constantly, either you're standing too much or you're sitting too much, whether you're in front of a computer or you're in your cruiser. And it just wreaks havoc on your hips, your back, like your posture, everything. And then on top of it, you're constantly in these stressful states. So our bodies naturally respond. It's funny, like 50% of our like mobility and stretch, you know, some people are like, I don't want to do yoga because I'm not flexible, or I can't touch my toes, or it's like, well, that's why you need it.
Right.
Like as you age and as you're like doing these like the daily work that you do, or even just like the tech snack we have, we're always kind of on our phones looking down.
Right.
Your bodies get tense and you get stressed. And when you're exposed to stress or trauma, or even if you have physical or mental stress, if you exercise, if you lift weights, which, like, who doesn't have all of those things, you are going to have a higher increased resting tension rate, which means like your body's just more stiff, it's more tight. And then it's just going to keep getting more tight over time. And if you're not training specifically to counterbalance that, or to improve your flexibility, because it has to be trained,
Right.
Then you're going to lose your mobility. It's going to get worse over time. You're going to have chronic pain. You're going to have more, like, you'll be more exposed to injuries. You just want to feel better in your body. You don't want to feel uncomfortable and tight all the time. So anyway, so that certification focuses on that. And the poses are a little bit more uncomfortable, because we think of stretching, you think of, okay, let me hold it for 30 seconds. That's
Right.
nothing for you. That's not stretching. You actually have to hold a pose between 2 to 5 minutes in order for it to lengthen, because what you want to do is you want to turn off that stretch reflex, because as soon as you start to reach in, again, over time, as your body tightens, you lose your capacity and your range, right? So then naturally your stretch reflex is going to turn on because it wants to protect your body. So then you're like, oh, okay, that hurts, like I can't move. But the longer you hold it, and then combined with nervous system hacks, so certain types of breathing in combination to turn off your stretch reflex, and again to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calm and relax.
Right.
A combination of that can actually change the shape of the fascia, which kind of attaches your muscles, and it rewires your nervous system. So a lot of the stuff that we keep in our bodies, we don't really recycle our emotions. We don't really recycle some of the stuff that we do at work. We kind of just hold it in. So when you practice yoga, there are certain postures that actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, again, combined with the breathing. And you have the ability to actually rewire your nervous system. So remember how I told you how your body can be set in these default patterns, operating patterns?
Right.
You're actually training your body to go back to its baseline out of these states because you're moving your body and you're doing these mindfulness movements at the same time.
Okay. So how important is, and I'm asking this more from a standpoint of someone, so somebody out there's listening to this, and if they're anything like me, probably 3 years ago, they're rolling their eyes. So we got to, give them a little bit. They're like, oh, I've heard this, or yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga's for girls.
Let's call it something else so they're not afraid of it. Yeah.
Exactly. So somebody out there's thinking that. So that being said, talk a little bit about the importance of, because yoga, in my understanding, has a lot to do with connecting it with the breath, the movement with the breath, the asana with the breath work. So my question, it would be, how important is that? And the reason I'm asking it is one of the things for me when I really realized that there was an issue besides the need for weight loss, which is what started the journey for me. And that was 63 pounds ago. So I'm happy that part of it was successful. But we had been out on a scene all night. Well, it had happened early in the evening, but we had been out on a pretty crazy scene. I'm not going to go in detail on here, but we had been out there all night. And when we were doing some after debriefing with people up the chain of command, one of the comments that was made to me is, you pretty much didn't breathe all night when they were watching the BWC footage and going back through what had happened. And I started realizing that a lot of times when you're in these extremely stressful situations, a lot of guys, sometimes you'll get like hyperventilating and stuff, or others you'll get like me, where you just don't breathe, or at least not normally. You're holding your breath for long periods of time. And so much of the yoga practice helps with that, because you're connecting that movement and you're also becoming more intentional in your thoughts. So I didn't know if maybe you could go a little bit more into that and your thoughts on that.
Yes, I love that you brought that up. Actually, I was helping McGill University. We're doing a mindfulness research study with Canadian law enforcement officers. And it's an 8-week online mindfulness program, but we were getting feedback and we were doing like weekly discussions with the group. And so when people started paying attention how they were operating at work, that was the feedback we were getting, that people would notice that they would actually hold their breath, they would stop breathing. Or to your point, yeah, or you're like, because your body starts, you're heading to that call, that high risk call, your heart rate starts to go up, you start to sweat, your breathing increases, all that stuff, right? So, I mean, I love that you touched on that, because you honestly need to train. So doing these practices on your off time is great, but where it's going to matter the most is in the chaos, in the stress. You're in it. I mean, I do those breath practices. I try to keep doing that when I'm out of call and how I'm interacting with people, because that's really when you want to train your body, right? But to your point, a lot of the responses that are happening in our bodies, it's a primal unconscious response. You don't have choice. It is just happening on its own, because that's how our bodies are made to get us away from danger. So when you're taking in all these different senses, if you're at a scene, you're showing up, which sometimes that's why talk therapy can be difficult for people after an incident, because parts of our brain shut down that's to do with our speech. And oftentimes how we remember an incident is through images or through our 5 senses. Yeah. So a lot of times you have to get back into your body it's kind of like a reverse, like, you like absorbed the incident through your body. Now you have to get back into your body in order to like kind of rewire it or make it feel safe again. Because when you're stuck in that state, you don't feel safe. Sometimes you can either underreact or overreact to stress after that, because you're not at your baseline. Again, how does that show up? That could be somebody, maybe there's use of force too much, or maybe there wasn't anything and someone just froze, and then you didn't affect an arrest or do your job appropriately, right? So
Right.
it's important to have these practices so you can perform your job in these high stressful situations, and you're training your body, right? But 3 ways that you can kind of make your body feel safe again, even just through, you could even just do this in your cruiser, but if you're doing like a yoga practice or a stretch practice, is just orient yourself. So when you take your 5 senses, when you're experiencing that way, it sends a signal unconsciously, again, that primal response to your limbic system. So it's a way of communicating unconsciously with your body. And again, these are kind of like tricks that you can do, but you want to orient yourself. So naturally, if you turn your head and you're like 180 degrees and you look around, especially when you first walk into a room or a situation, that is your body's way of knowing, okay, there's no threat here, like I'm okay. So that will kind of bring your threat level down. Again, it's that unconscious stimulus that it's trying to pick up.
Okay.
Another thing too is like just bring awareness to your senses, your 5 senses. So, your sight, the sound, the smells, just being aware and like direct experiencing, that will calm your system down too. Because it kind of puts you in a state where you just have a level of awareness, right? So that your body feels more safe and a bit more calm. The 3rd thing you can do is ground yourself. So, and this again, through yoga practice, you can practice these things too, just feeling your body on the ground or your feet. If you're not in a position where you can do yoga and you're just in your car, or you're at a scene, maybe it's touching your fingertips, or even just recognizing your feet are on the ground and what does that feel like. That will ground you quickly to kind of bring you back to the present moment, to be able to respond effectively. Another thing is the breath that you mentioned too, the 3rd thing. So just paying attention to your breathing. So just bringing a level of awareness. So maybe you're driving to the call and you're breathing, like I will focus on my breath. Okay, deeper breaths, right? Because that's going to slow your heart rate down. It's going to make sure that you can respond instead of react. It gives you that split second so that you can process what's happening and you can make an effective decision, and not just, maybe make a decision too quickly because you're not thinking about it and you're just trying to react, right? So it'll allow you to revert back to your training a little bit better too. And then another thing you can do, especially if, let's say you're really wired and you have a hard time falling asleep at night, you want to really bring your breath down into your belly. You can even do this like when you're at work or on the call too, but the belly breathing, because a lot of us breathe that really shallow, it's up in our chest. Your stomach should be moving out and in, and like it feels weird at first. You have to actually consciously try to do it. I have to practice too. I do this work, but I'm not perfect. I'm nowhere near perfect. It's called a practice, right? Because
absolutely,
it's you got to remember to do it. But I feel like that really helps you fall asleep. And what it does is we have a vagus nerve, it's called. It literally connects throughout our whole body. It's like 80% of it. It sends signals from your body actually up to your brain, so bottom up, and it can change your mood and it can change your mindset right away just from those breathing methods. So those are just some kind of tips. You don't have to necessarily do it on a yoga mat, but you could kind of do them wherever you're at, and those are some tricks that can help too.
I think those are great ideas, and they all can be done in the vehicle, and they're all things that I've been doing on this journey. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
You need to keep doing what you're doing with your art.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm trying.
Yeah.
But no, I love that. Those are all absolutely great ideas. I know sometimes I think when people hear things like breath work or breathing, or maybe they've been watching Wim Hof on some show or whatever, and they're afraid, well, I don't have the count right, or, they hear all these, well, it's got to be 27 breaths, or it's got to be, they hear these different numbers and stuff. And they just don't do anything because they feel perplexed or kind of overstimulated. They don't really know what to do at that point. So what you're saying is different than that. It starts somewhere. Is that correct? Is that essentially where
Yeah,
you're coming from?
and I know there's all these different things out there, but there's 3 really simple ways that you can, like, just to get it simple. If you want to relax, if you want to
Okay.
induce relaxing, you're breathing. So you want to inhale for 4 and exhale for double the amount, so 8. So the longer exhale, that's what's going to really calm your nerves down. It's going to calm your system down. If you want to stay like balanced breathing, if you're, it's usually just 4 and 4, 4 and 5. You can, as long as you're just aware that you're breathing, like that's even good. just
right.
Actually think about like, oh, wait a minute, I'm breathing. And that will actually, that's beneficial. And the more you do that, there's these like little micro practices, right? And a lot of people are like, well, I can't meditate or I can't do this. I honestly don't have 5 minutes. Like I can't even sit still for 5 minutes. It honestly gets easier and easier. It's just like you don't go to the gym, do 1 rep for your bicep and be like, okay, like I can't do this, I'm like done. It's like you have to build that muscle memory and that resilience. And it's the same way you want to work out your mind and the breath work that way, the same way.
Yeah. And I was going to, so everything you said is exactly summed up in the word you just gave, which is meditation, because that's really what a lot of this, and at least in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, a lot of this comes down to an intentionality. It comes down to a mindfulness. And a lot of times it's part of your meditative practice, grounding, concentrating on the breath, orienting senses, sometimes just, pausing and thinking about the breathing and what it feels like as it warms and as it cools and so forth. That being said, I will say the hardest thing for me being a cop and the beginning was meditating, because my brain wanted to think about, and still does, a million other things. And someone who's inclined to doing these kind of projects and running businesses, or
your to-do list, what's for dinner, all these other things you gotta go.
In fact, as we get older, we can't remember things half the time, but when you sit down and do meditation the first time, you're going to remember all of it all of a sudden. But like you said, it gets so much easier over time, and that intentionality, it's really amazing, and it grounds you. And what I like is kind of going back to how we began this entire line of conversation, is all these things become part of it, because you start thinking, the more mindful you become with your body and the senses and so forth, then you start thinking about food, and you start thinking all these things tie together, and it really becomes, you start realizing, in my opinion, how far away from our original state we've become. We live in houses where we never actually touch, like you said, sometimes you got to touch your fingers to actually touch something that's real.
When's the last time you touched the dirt? I don't know. Were you outside with your feet on the grass? Like, we're inside our houses, and then we're in our car, and then we go to work and we're inside again. We're just inside all the time. Just to actually, and there's studies that show that boosts your immunity, being outdoors, connecting with nature, which is our natural state, that we're in. And just to kind of unplug and disconnect, right? Especially like even your police car, you constantly have the radio going. I don't know if you get the phantom radio, you think you hear something,
right?
Because you're constantly listening to the radio. It's like you got to turn it off, right? So try to disconnect. And if it's too difficult to try mindfulness and sit for 5-10 minutes, do the walking outside and just listen to nature, but try to pay attention to the trees, not like what you're having for dinner later. Because that's the narrative, that narrative mindset. What you want to do is practice, which is the harder state to practice in, is that direct experiencing, which is being present in the moment. What are your 5 senses? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Being present in the moment. And the more you practice that, the easier that it is to take in information and to do your job better and to feel more energized. Your performance goes up, your sleep goes up, you're less angry, you're not triggered as much, you don't have less fatigue, less emotional dysregulation. There's tons of studies that show that it helps reduce chronic pain. It also reduces your stress, decreases your heart rate, hypertension, all the things that we're going to be exposed to in this job. If you don't counterbalance it, what are you setting yourself up for in, a 30-year career? So I know that some people might say, like, what does this have to do with policing? But it has everything to do with your long-term health if you want to succeed. And the reason why, I'll tell you just quickly, I know you were asking about my backstory, but the reason why I'm so passionate about this and why I care about it so much is because of my own experiences that I went through. Within the first 5 years, I was feeling burnt out. I was constant inflammation. I had digestive issues, my diet and my exercise. I was averaging like that went out the window, my sleep and my diet. I was averaging maybe 3-4 hours of sleep, if that. I was like, I looked like I was fit from the outside, but I felt like crap on the inside. I was just kind of going downhill, lots of overtime, lots of really busy calls. And then, so I got hired in 2011, and then 2015, even though I was doing some of these practices and I was trying to manage the best I could without the information, I didn't have all the information. I didn't have all this information. Like I wish like my first 5 years was terrible. But it sparked me on this journey, right? 2015. So one of my platoon mates, she was a really good friend of mine. She had 3 children, and her middle child ended up dying in an ATV accident. Wow. And it was like the worst experience of my life, trying to support one of my best friends who just is going through the worst time of her life. And then on top of it, losing someone who was like a niece to me. My work ended up giving me I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks compassionate leave, so I could help plan the funeral with them, give them support, write the eulogy, and just be there for them. But then I went back to work. I didn't have time off work. And then right as I went back to work, I had a back-to-back, like 3 calls. And I've had calls, all sorts of different calls, where I was never really affected by it. But I think it's because I had this overwhelming grief in my personal life. Yeah. And then on top of this, it was like compounding. I had 3 back-to-back really gruesome calls that were triggers for me. A 7-year-old that had died from choking. I was first on scene to a double fatal car accident of a 20-year-old couple. And I wish I didn't look in the ambulance because it was nasty. And then I had a good Samaritan that got ran over from a road rage incident. And I had to do the death notification, and like all these kids of the same age. And I was like, not okay. I didn't know what was wrong with my body. I was in that state. I didn't know unconsciously. I felt like I was not in control of my emotions. I was self-isolating. I didn't want to be around people. I felt like I was crying all the time. I didn't know why, like what was happening to me. I didn't know what was happening to my body. So that's what really, so there was like I said, 7 months where I was like not feeling myself. I didn't know what was happening to me. So the following year, I ended up going to Thailand for a full month by myself solo, started to research everything, even more about yoga, trauma release exercises, detoxing, everything that I could. My goal was to figure out, how can I work for a 30-year career in a high stressful environment like this and shift work on top of it. Right. How am I going to survive? What can I do? And then I was learning everything about mindfulness while I was there too. I went up into the mountains, learned all the different types of meditation, how it trains your body differently. And so when I came back, my mission was to take what I've learned and share it with other people so that I could help other people not go what I went through, at least to prevent people from maybe getting post-traumatic stress disorder or other types of psychological difficulties. It was the first time in my life that I actually understood for the first time, because you hear people, oh, mental health. It was the first time in my career that I was like, I understood it for the first time, how somebody could have difficulties in this job. So that's why, I got through that period, and I want to be able to share that there are self-regulating capabilities, that you can self-heal, that there are these practices where they can keep you strong. And I'm not saying that, medication or going to, and therapy, those things are definitely there and they're needed. Yeah. But there's other practices too that are out there that are holistic, natural. We just have to teach people what they are. We just have to know what's happening to our bodies and then give them the information about how to counterbalance that. So that's why I care so much about it.
I love that. And it's powerful. And it parallels what I'm seeing about both in my own life and in the life of others. You come in this career and you hear the statistics of the number of people that don't even make it 5 years after retirement. And why pour yourself into, this is such a great career with such a great opportunity to do good, to be there, like you said, in that moment of crisis for people, to be there and be able to offer hope to families or, whatever that is. And you're going to have those opportunities in this career. But if you don't take care of yourself, not only is there a great possibility of it spiraling out of control and you never even making it to the end of your career because you get fired or let go or something even worse happens. But then also there's a great possibility that you've poured so much into other people and yet you don't even make it past retirement to be able to
Mm,
enjoy what you've worked so hard
yeah.
for. So that is such
Because
a powerful why.
I was gonna say, because then people who retire, then you're sitting there with it, right? It's the first time where you're not go go go. You're sitting with all the things you haven't really dealt with.
Yeah.
So you want to prevent that. And I think too is we really need to change our culture of like not like feeling like we have to be tough. It's like, yeah, you have to be tough at calls, but then with your coworkers, and it's like realistically, you've got stories. I know you do. We
Yeah,
all have stories that we've
we
had
do.
like crappy calls. You know what I mean? And it's like I'm a peer supporter for my organization to support other people to walk through their challenging times and help them heal. But I've been on both sides. I've needed the support and I've also supported other people. So I think when we can have each other's back a little bit better that way and let them know that, yeah, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk to somebody. Like we have to understand this is the type of profession that we have to be a little bit more open and honest and a little bit vulnerable about that, because that's realistic. It's part of our job, you know, and we can't do it all ourselves. Like we also need support too. So that's why I think it's super important that we keep the conversation going about mental health and advocating for these positive changes. And every single person has the ability to make a difference, like just even one person, right? You have the
Yeah.
ability to make a difference. And it's okay to just say, hey, like reach out to somebody, we're like, hey, how are you doing? And it's like, hey, how's your mental health? Like it's been crappy with COVID. It's like we're dealing with the same type of anxiety and stresses that the rest of the population is dealing with, on top of all the other stuff that we're dealing with. So it's
Right.
piled, and it's like you see people going through separations and divorces. And again, I feel like the kicker too is like you have the stuff you deal with at work, but then if you're going through something in your personal life, it's that much harder, right? So just be kind to each other. Let's be supportive and don't
I
wear it,
love
share
it.
it. It's not
I
weak.
love it. That is awesome. Let me switch gears real quick. I could talk to
Yeah,
you all night, by the way, Amy.
I know.
Let me switch gears with you real quick because I want
Yes.
to talk about what the main reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because of this exciting opportunity you have. Muscle and Fitness, hers. Is that correct? Is that the name of the magazine?
The name of the magazine.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you got involved in it, what it is, and what you're trying to do?
Yeah. So there's a fitness competition. It's called Miss Fitness and Health. And the competition is to compete to be on the cover of that magazine. And the winner will get a 2-page spread to talk about how fitness and wellness has impacted their life. For me, though, I want to use that platform to bring awareness to mental health, because I feel like, like we talked about, a lot of people focus on diet and exercise. And I feel like people are missing the component of the mental health. In order for you to be healthy and to be fit, there's a mental health component. So I just want to bring more awareness by using that platform. And then on top of that, whoever wins, they win $20,000. And so my goal is to actually take the money, and I'm going to build wellness workshops. Some of the stuff that I've been talking about, that I've been researching for the last 5 or 6 years, I want to create wellness workshops for frontline first responders and healthcare workers, because they are, out there being exposed to a lot of this stuff. And I really want to teach them the tools that I've learned to be able to help counterbalance some of the stuff that they're going through. So
It's awesome. So how does the program
so vote
work?
for me. Yeah.
Yes. So they need to vote for you, and I voted
Yeah.
for you, and I want others to do it. But how does the program work? So you've been actually through a couple sets now, and this
It's
is
been,
probably
yeah, like I think it's been already 4 weeks. So actually, they just announced quarterfinals today,
okay.
and
And we're
which
recording
means,
this on Friday. So for you listeners, you're going to be
yeah,
listening to
yeah,
this the Thursday after the day we recorded
yeah.
this. So
So currently, so eight people have moved forward. We are now competing for the top 3 positions. So next week, when you hear this, hopefully I'm in the top 3.
yes.
So vote for me now. But yeah, the top 3. So the top 3 will move forward, and then we'll be competing for the first place prize winner. So I need your votes. Yeah, I need the Blue family to
And
help support. So, and this isn't just going to be a Canadian program that I'm going to be launching. This is going to be global. So I'm going to be making it available to US and anyone who really needs it. I'm also creating an online course. It's going to be called Flexibility: How to Rewire Your Nervous System to Reduce Physical Pain and Mental Stress. So
okay.
again, some of these techniques that I've been researching, I really want to get it out to people.
Okay. I love
Yeah,
it.
so if you
Now,
want to vote, I actually have the link attached. I don't know if you're on Instagram, but if you can follow at the Yoga Cop, and I
yep.
have it directly in my bio link. And I don't know if you can share the actual link. I don't know if you post this somewhere. You can maybe put it in the show notes or something like that as
Yep.
well.
I will do that as well. And I will share so they can easily get to your page to follow the link just in case it doesn't allow them to
Yeah.
get through. So we'll make sure. So everybody at the Yoga Cop, be sure to go there and to vote. And they can vote as well with donations for the Wounded Warriors, correct? And then that actually gets you
Yes.
additional votes out
Yeah.
and over and above the single vote every day.
Yeah, so everybody, it has to be through your Facebook. You have to put your Facebook login like through the link, and that's because they just make sure that it's not automated robots. It's like you're an actual. They have to confirm you're an actual person voting. But you get one daily free vote every 24 hours through the Facebook link. But there's a second link that you can click, which is called the Warrior Vote, and those are donations, so you can donate money. So for every dollar you donate is a vote for me, and the money goes to Jared Allen's Home for Wounded Warriors. And what they do is they're using the money to remodel homes or to build homes for handicap accessible, just to be able to maneuver like in the house and whatnot for veterans that come back actually injured, who maybe are in wheelchairs now. And it's very costly to make those changes. And again, I know we've been talking a lot about mental health and just trying to deal with coming home from war and then having to reintegrate into everyday life again. This is a way that can really take stress and off of their shoulders. So
Well,
any vote I appreciate, even if it's just one. So thanks.
absolutely. And so listeners definitely, and everything will be linked up at the Yoga Cop and make sure you vote. One of the things I love, Amy, is through this entire conversation, I've seen pretty much what I thought I would hear or heard what I thought I would hear in looking at your site. And that is just what a big heart you have, whether it is trying to win magazine contests to help others through the Wounded Warriors, or whether or not it's climbing mountains to help out hospitals, or whether it's animal ethics. There is a pattern here of just being kind. And I really appreciate that. So you mentioned it a little bit, but what is your mission next? What's next on the horizon? What can the listeners expect to see from you?
Well, again, if I win this competition, again, my goal is to actually launch a side business. So I want to be doing more public speaking to kind of share this knowledge with people, create some online courses. I'm going to create a website. So what I really want to do is have all of the resources and all the stuff that I'm doing. And I want to just have one-stop shop where people can stop and whatever it, again, like I kind of mentioned, you have to figure out what's good for you. So if I can be that conduit for somebody to find what they need to help with their wellness, or even just like other types of supports in the community, I want to be able to share that through my platform. So just kind of bringing all the things I've been doing together into one area.
Perfect.
Also just going to throw out too that there's an upcoming, we're doing a webinar series. We're going to be having it's on August the 25th at 2 p.m. If you go to wepolice.ca, we are having discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm going to be hosting that. Two researchers, one's from a detective from NYPD, and he's also a scientist at the Columbia University Psychiatry Department, and another researcher from New Zealand. They've been researching the awe emotion, which is very similar to mindfulness, and how it builds pro-social emotions, interconnectedness, and these types of things, and how maybe we can build it into law enforcement and the work we're doing as it relates to that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens.
Okay.
And then in October the 12th to the 17th, there's it's a global first responder resiliency summit. It's being hosted by the Center for Mindfulness in Public Safety, and they're based out of the US. So there's going to be, it's going to be for free. So just go to their website again, the Center for Mindfulness in Public Safety, and they'll have all the links there. It's a free summit, and they're going to have all sorts of different people speaking. I'm actually going to be a guest speaker there for one of the sessions as well.
That's awesome. I don't know how you fit it on your schedule, but that's great. I will be sure to link those up as well so listeners can find them, and I'll be taking a look at them as well. Amy, before I let you go, let me ask you, I always ask a final question of the guest. You've essentially answered it a million different ways, but what I like to do with this question is kind of boil it down. So what is the one takeaway, the one thing that law enforcement officers can do that's going to make a difference in their personal lives?
I would just say, there's solutions out there. So if you're having a tough time or you're not sure where to start, because I felt like I had days like that where it's like you feel overwhelmed and you don't know, again, with your health, trying to get everything balanced. You have the capability to self-heal. So once you start just finding some of the information and some of these tools, then you'll feel like, you're kind of in control to just have that intention, right? Just to have that intention.
I love it. Thank you so much. So everyone can find you at The Yoga Cop, and you don't have a website yet, but that will be up. And when it is, I will make sure that I link that up in the future. So
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then my LinkedIn profile is just my name. So
okay, at Amy Boudreau, and I will have that all linked up so that people can find you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. Appreciate
Amy,
it.
thank you so much for coming on.